And it's Dan and James talking about the Villa games. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the AVFC Faithful podcast, long overdue, joined as always by Dan and James, and this week by Dan Pritchard, our now go-to statistical analysis expert for the AVFC Faithful podcast, and that is at 1874 Pritch on X. Dan, how are you doing today, my friend?
Oh, very well, Dan. How are you? It's great. It's a great day.
Not bad, thanks, Dan. We're talking to the resident James of the group as well. You're right, James.
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm in between two Dans, and it's a good day to go over a bit of a squad assessment. So looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's the prime time for us to run through a little run through of where we are as a squad. I know obviously you guys did a great pod earlier on in the season. We really wanted to get Dan back on, especially with me to get involved as well, get you in sort of a bit of a Danwich, so to speak. And yeah, so we've got a fair few bit to run over. So well, I guess the first thing we can start chatting about is just the general strengths and weaknesses of the squad and of the season so far. I mean, it's quite a general way of talking, but I think there's enough we can chat about that's quite important and might be able to. I think a lot of people get caught up in just the less of the data, but more so just the points tally and who we've played and the results that have come our way. And it's quite interesting to see how that's actually coming across. And I mean, we've spoke loads about the Newcastle game just off the cuff and how it didn't feel like a 5-1. So I guess really what I'm interested to see what people think is our main actual strength at the moment and what can actually be determined as a weakness.
I think my top strength would probably actually be flexibility. I mean, there's a lot of strengths individually, and obviously that the coach in general is a strength because of his pedigree. But I think genuinely versatility in how we can approach things and how we can tweak things. Like we'll go through the tweaks and stuff properly after. But obviously that tweak he made in the international break, was it around the Palace game where he dropped Kamara back in, like. Having a manager that can do that so quickly and pull it off so well and it bear its fruits that fast is a real positive. That's what I'd probably say my strength is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Like Villa, like we have a pretty good squad, but it's also now a squad that is performing more than the sum of its parts. Like you think back to the days of Dean Smith and how reliant we were on just Grealish being a standout player, and now every player looks like Grealish. It's hard to pick out like, oh, he's the best guy, or he's the best guy. I think we're a little bit reliant on Douglas Luiz at the moment, and that might be a weakness of the way we're currently playing, that a lot of it is going through Douglas Luiz, but I think it's also a bit circumstantial. You lose Moreno, who was when you look into these kind of possession value models, he was one of the highest rated players in Villa squad last season after coming in January. You lose Ramsey, who adds a bit of that, and both of those players are mobile, a good counter press, and that probably leads to the second weakness, which is, despite the fact we create a lot of good chances, we're creating almost two goal score, like the equivalent of like 2 goal scoring chances a game in kind of these expected goals numbers, which has always been a stupid name. Just chance creation would have been far better. But we're conceding almost, by the numbers, kind of 1.2 goals against, and that's quite high for what we're now looking at as can we push into the top 4? Can we get Champions League spots? And that's just quite a bit higher than those around us. It's something I think everyone will want to look at.
Sorry, it's just as soon as you said that, I sort of came to a realization that I haven't realized that it doesn't feel like we concede those that high amount of chances. I know obviously it's different between game to game. Sometimes it's because of the way that XG is proportioned and how obviously it plays out. But it's weird that you mentioned that, because it doesn't feel there's any games, particularly recently, where I can think of that felt like we were actually succumbing to that much attack from the other team.
Yeah, so it's actually that 1.2 average was from a 10 game rolling average. So it does it evens out between the games. So it'll include things like Newcastle, Liverpool,
Yeah,
and those games. And I would actually agree with you. I think we were on the wrong side of variance against Forest. I think you've got 2 goals coming from 25 yards or above, and then we can't get a chance over the line. I think if the weakness in the system is we don't have a great, we will lose if we don't have a great game in front of goal, and the opposition has a good game in front of goal. Well, that's every system. It's every system in football. No one gets away with that. Sooner or later, you ride your luck.
Yeah, and I think I'd agree. It doesn't feel like we give up that many big chances and stuff. And it's quite frustrating, really, how little clean sheets we've kept this season. And sometimes poor defending, sometimes it's lapses or strange occurrences, like the Martinez own goal against Luton, which was just a moment of madness, really. Like, you don't really concede those goals very often, and it's costing you a clean sheet. So you would expect that over a period of 10 games, I'd expect that goals conceded average to drop a bit more. But at the same time, we're coming up against better teams now as well. So that'll be really interesting to see how that evens out, whether it goes down a bit, goes up a bit. Those games against the top teams are going to be really interesting to see how we approach them defensively more than anything, I think, because we know what our game is on the ball. We know what we can do, whether it's creating those sort of micro transitions or whether it's playing out from the back. We've got such a variant of ways that we can attack that I don't worry about that. It is always the out of possession or trying to stop those transitions that's really interesting. And obviously against those better teams that can work just as well in tight spaces as open spaces, it's going to be really tough to stop them. But, you got one of those coaches that is an excellent problem solver, and he is constantly evolving the team. We've seen 2 or 3 iterations of Villa already so far since he's been in, and we'll see more. And then especially because we've got obviously January coming up soon, whether we dip into the market or not, and that'll have an effect on what we do. So yeah, there is just a couple of weaknesses that feel like it's a side effect, as I said earlier, of how we're trying to be a little bit more expansive this season. And I haven't got all of the. I did plan to have a bit more of the XG data on to hand, so we could sort of see how much we were playing a bit more expansively and creating more chances than we were like last season. And I think that the byproduct of it is conceding a few more chances, in the sense of we're stepping up the pitch quite a lot more. I mean, we've constantly had a high line under Unai, but how I think we're willing to operate with slightly more gaps in between because of how we're trying to position ourselves up the pitch. So yeah, the evolution of it is going to be really interesting to see what our next sort of move is.
Yeah, so I do have the numbers to hand here, and so we, by the end of last season, in terms of the chances created, we were right at the end, just over 1.5 chances. At its peak this season, it's almost two per game. So we're talking, a goal every couple games, which at this level, it's the difference between winning 2-1 and taking 3 points and climbing up the table at the end of the day. It is these like fine margins. You're not going to score an extra goal every game. So 0.5 extra in terms of the chance creation really is quite a bit.
I think it's interesting because something I noticed that it wasn't really adapting whether it was a strength or a weakness, and I guess it's less statistical, but more. There's probably a bit of data to back it up, but it didn't feel like there was a sort of transition period from the signings and the change that we had to make from the start of the season to like the second and third game. Obviously, you've got 3 starters, well, 4 essentially, if you include Wendy in with it, that drop out of the squad and they're immediately replaced with people that weren't, albeit Luca Dean was obviously heavily involved last season still. It's a complete change to the way that we're playing. Obviously, you've got Diaby, Zaniolo playing a lot, Bailey with a new role, and obviously John McGinn now playing his role. I think what I found interesting was there was never a phase where it looked like it wasn't working or people were still learning. I mean, we can still argue, obviously, Zaniolo is still adapting to his role and he's playing on his weaker left hand side. But that was what I saw as a particular strength, is that the player seems so bought in to the nature of it that they're actually playing to the exact system that is sort of not forced upon them, but that is the system that they're bred to be playing. So that's what I saw personally as well. And I guess the only real weakness you can ever really suggest is that, I guess, the susceptibility to counter-attacks. That's what I felt, but I think that might be a bit more recency bias as well, because obviously it happened a lot against AZ at home, and obviously a little bit against Forest, albeit that they were caught offside a lot. But that's pretty much all I even saw on that.
Yeah, like when we're talking about our possession systems, it's always a talk of trade-offs, and we're looking, we're trying to play this high line, not necessarily to win the ball high up the pitch, but like try and funnel the ball into that box midfield where McGinn, Louise, or like someone like eventually Ramsey will kind of win the ball back. You see Villa winning the ball back just on the top end of their midfield third a lot, and just turn that into transition attacks. But yeah, a consequence of that and trying to be high line compact in the middle is you concede space behind and to the sides a little bit. So I think sides with pacey wingers who can maybe take a player on 1v1, or if you can get in the right position to as Forest did, get a 1-1-2 in there, release a quick winger. The only kind of a slight weakness that is less system based, and I do think it's something that Emery will kind of look at, is we do, as a result of dropping Kamara back, we don't really have someone whose job it is to sit in front of the back four, and when we are forced back on those quick transitions, Nottingham's first goal comes as a result of a cutback, and I can't remember who she scores the goal in the end, but it's got a lot of space in front of the back four in that particular moment on transition, and I think that's one that we can look at solving, maybe having one of Louise or McGinn who drops in, be a bit more positionally disciplined, or if you find a way to get Kamara further up the field in those moments, would maybe help that a little bit and just snuff out the danger of the cutback. It would have been quite a bit of a worry for me if Maddison was fit for our next game against Tottenham, because it's absolutely the sort of chance that he would live on. As it is against Tottenham, and I kind of expect against City and Arsenal as well, we might actually continue the temptations to drop the line back a bit, and I actually think we might be a bit brave with that and actually try and disrupt the opposition's build up a bit more, make Arsenal and Man City a bit more comfortable on the ball. We've seen Newcastle get a fair bit of joy out of that approach, and neither of Newcastle's games against Arsenal or Manchester City were in any way comfortable for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think with like especially the City game, I think we saw last season when they were against Arsenal, they were quite willing to go long over the top if they needed to. Um, but I think that's with how well we're coached and drilled on the high line. I don't feel too worried about that. Maybe be a bit different if they've got De Bruyne in that side, but they seem to have a lot of ball carriers at the moment, more than sort of killer ball player. And the same with Tottenham with Madison out. I feel like they again, like when you've got, I don't even know, is Basuma or Sarr one of those available?
Assume not, is he?
Basuma's not, yeah.
Yeah, so even Sarr, I think he's more of a ball carrier than progressing through passing, obviously. Son's the threat in behind, really, but I'd still trust Konsa against him to match him quite often. It'd still have to be something that we're wary about, but I do think that you need to be in their face a little bit more because at the end of the day, if you drop off, they've got the players that can, play it around you. So, as we said with trade-offs, that's how it works. You want to squeeze that play up the pitch, and if you're forcing them into the long ball, it's not exactly how they want to play, really. So, yeah, that will be interesting to see how we approach it. But it's going to be tough games, and I'm really looking forward to them because I feel like that's our barometer. These next four league games, I think it is what is Spurs, Bournemouth, Arsenal, City.
Yeah.
It's nice to have Bournemouth, in the middle of that. But that week against City and Arsenal's a big week to see where we really are at because if you come out of that week winning at least one of those, that'd be some going really against those teams.
Yeah, I just had horrible flashbacks to Bjorn Engels in against Son Heung-min, and yeah, I trust Konza and his physical ability and his pace a lot more.
Yeah.
A lot more. It shows how far we've come.
Yeah. Wow, that's
Yeah.
it's a memory I didn't think I could remind myself of that quickly, and that hurts even more. I distinctly remember being sat next to a Tottenham fan and telling them how happy I was that we drew that game, and then seeing that happen. So it was a dark time, wasn't it?
I was just thinking, you I just remember what you said about not having like a sitter in front of the defence. I think this is something that we both spoke about on the last video as well. Not having someone that's happy to sit there and mop up and just pass the ball along like a high volume passer more than a progressive one alongside either Louise or Kamara or both. What we did end up seeing a sort of situational 4-3-3 at times, and we saw Kamara get dropped into the back through, which was something that I thought might happen. But as you say, it's when you commit McGinn and Louise forward ahead of those, and then you've got your wing back side as such a space, and then it's the transitions can get you like that. But that I think those are the sort of areas I expect to be addressed in January, maybe. If not, then definitely the summer is because the drop off for one from Kamara and Louise to Redendonka is obviously massive, but also lacking that sort of natural sitter that's happy to just clear up behind the pressing midfielders is something that I think we really need. And then I still think that, I mean, Moreno's going to sort out the left side when it comes to tighter spaces compared to Dean, who is happy to work when you give him extra space. The right hand side still for me with Cash, because I think if you want to adapt your style a little bit, he's not exactly first phase build up brilliant at that. We've seen he's very good at box crashing this season, and he'd be more handy in that sense. But when it's out wide, unless he's on his game, when he's 1v1, he can struggle a bit at times, again, beating his man or chopping onto his left foot and stuff like that. So I think those are areas that could really make a difference if we recruit different characteristics in those places.
Yeah, on Cash, and I don't want to dig him out because I think he has a lot of qualities, especially his ability to get up and down, and some of his physical ones. But I we kind of lost our finishing box crasher in Jacob Ramsey, and we spoke before about how we supplemented that with Cash. But I was looking into the data because I remembered he'd only scored the 2 goals against Burnley, and he's still actually third in Villa's team for the number of shots he's taken. But actually, since the end of September, he's only gotten about 5 shots in the league with about with about a 0.5 xG. So cumulatively about a 50% chance of scoring those. And I wonder if we're kind of getting the most out of him in that position, or if he's someone that the club look at and like we could find someone in this position who maybe either suits that box crashing role and finishes a lot better, or someone that would enable Kamara to, while Kamara did struggle with the counter pressing, would enable him to sit in front of the defence a bit more, because they can be that right centre back during build up phases. I think that could be quite, that would be the area I would imagine we looked at in January, if we are to look at anyone. And I'm not sure how things work out FFP wise at the moment, but yeah, Cash has been someone that has had a good season. He goes back and forth, but I wonder if the box crashing was a bit of a surprise to begin with, and now opposition are seeing it coming a bit more, reducing the number of shots he can get. Although he is, for 5 shots, that's still, the quality of chances is pretty good for the shots he's getting, but the number of shots is quite down.
Interesting. Well, I think that leads us on quite well, actually, because I know it's something that I was interested in when James mentioned about it beforehand, and it was sort of combining between both the tweaks that we've made. Obviously, touched upon it. I think you mentioned about obviously Kamara dropping in and how that's changed. About the tactical tweaks that we've sort of made, and ones that you can possibly see coming in, maybe even as quick as actually probably the next month when the overload of fixtures actually starts piling on into the actual squad itself. Because I noticed this even from, especially in this podcast, I am even between me and James, I'm way below my tactical knowledge of how we play, and even I can see that there is a distinct difference between not only just last season to this season, but even just the first 3 games to the most recent 3 games. And it does feel like maybe that's something to do with the fixture pilot. Maybe it is, Emery's got just time and he's seeing things that he wants, nip that in the bud and let's start changing that around. And I'm just interested to see what you think about that, Dan, and sort of not only what you've seen so far that's the tweaks we've made, but what you think could be coming, or what you think maybe should be coming.
So yeah, I talked a little bit about one of our weaknesses, that kind of bit of space in front of the back four for cutbacks. But given the schedules we're going into, particularly Tottenham, Man City, Arsenal, teams that are going to want the ball, I expect we might end up looking quite a bit more transitional than we have done. Certainly over the last period of games, I might expect a few more long balls coming out of Pau Torres, and we've created a couple of good chances that way. And with Moreno coming back, I think that opens up more areas where we can be a little bit less dependent on Douglas Luiz, and it might allow, if Zaniolo is to play and continue playing on the left, it might allow him a bit more freedom if he can kind of work that relationship with Moreno. There are certain, Sam Tykov mentioned this on the TIFO podcast, but there are certain runs that Luca Digne doesn't really make, or isn't comfortable making, that Moreno will do almost every time. And So I think the tweaks will make are very much. I think Emery's someone that likes working with players and will tweak things depending on who's fit, who is available, and who best suits who's coming in front of him. So I'm not sure we'll get another big. I'm not sure if we'll get another kind of big tactical switch like the releasing Cash and dropping Kamara into the right centre back role. I'm not sure if I see something like that coming as much as little tweaks here and there that'll be opposition dependent or just player availability dependent.
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously because when we dropped Kamara back, we saw, I can't remember whose video I was watching the other day, we saw how it was after the Liverpool game, I think, how often Kamara was getting caught up the field trying to press sort of in such a large space that when that was bypassed, there was so much space. So it was kind of the logical switch, and then obviously you bring McGinn inside and Cash pushes further up in that sort of triangular movement of how they rotate up, which is, as you say, afterwards you see the sense in it. But, beforehand you wouldn't see. Well, the few people would probably suggest it, but you know what I mean. It makes sense afterwards after you see a mastermind do it like that. But yeah, when we have the left hand side back available, it gives us so much more options again with Moreno and I love the Moreno and Ramsey partnership because Ramsey quite naturally drifts into that half space. Moreno naturally, I think he's played a couple of times in his career as a winger, a left winger. He will naturally make that run to the byline with or without the ball. And I think I like, obviously, the right foot, left foot combination there because you have Ramsey that can carry inside as well and then play the disguise back to Moreno. I like that dynamic. You sort of get that if Cash plays and McGinn's in that half space on the right as well. We saw that against Brighton, I think it was, for the first goal. That ball in behind, Cash runs onto it, and then the sort of low ball across that we always see. So I think you're missing a couple of those dynamics now, not just in terms of quality, but those different dynamics in terms of position and characteristics are so key to a team. And I say it probably every week about how much we miss Jacob Ramsey for a couple of reasons. Not just we know he's a good player in the numbers that he provides, but when you have a space creator and a space interpreter like him, it can just change games in itself. No matter how much you tactically approach a game, when you have such individual quality that's different, with the ball, makes a huge difference. So I would like to see Zaniolo come into his own in that sense as well, because we know he's got the ability. I think he just needs to speed up his decision-making process at times. I think you can see that he wants to make the right pass, but it's taken so long to think about it that he sometimes gets dispossessed in that way. I think better players around him sort of bring that out of him because he'll see that. So the more that he plays around that, I think he'll be okay. But yeah, I think in general, tactically, as we said at the start, our flexibility is one of our biggest strengths. So we will constantly see a bit of an evolution and a revolution in how we dip in and out of things. So this is why I think that these games coming up, the tough ones, are going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, like to add to that, we saw Tielemans on the left again against Fulham, and having that midfield of 4 central midfielders, I think is something we'll see. Especially with Ramsey coming back, we'll see more often, and especially again with the fixtures coming up, I think we're going to want to create opportunities in transition, having those 4 central midfielders, especially someone like Ramsey, who gives you that off-ball upside, or bringing Moreno back, who's that bit more mobile than Digne, to be able to get back into the back 4. I think these are the sort of tweaks that we'll see for the upcoming fixtures, and potentially that's why Tielemans was used in that left midfield role against Fulham. Thinking a few games ahead.
I think for me, it's more so the case as well of that. I say this way too much, I think, and I think I repeat it nearly every week, but it's strange to think that we're actually a squad that's not really even a year old, and a squad that's had so much put into it that really, we don't get me wrong, I say this as well. I think we did benefit from the fact we had the World Cup extended break for an opportunity for Unai to lay out the idea in the outset that he has. But I mean, mainly judging by what James said about Jacob Ramsey and Alex Moreno, I think something I realised that we missed so much more. The problem is it happened in my head when you mentioned the disguised pass. I saw it, and it's all I keep seeing now is the backward slide rule pass towards the end of the byline, and that seems to be the only thing that I keep thinking that we're missing out on. I think that's the main thing we missed out on against Forest. Was the one I thought of mainly. Like, that was the game where I just sat there and was like, all I would want for this game now is Alex Moreno to come in 65th minute and just be that person to consistently run that byline, and even if he's not always the one with the ball there, it just drags. He's constantly got someone with him there. But that seemed to be the only idea tweak that I could see that was actually going to probably come on my end. But that's, again, I think that might just be my borderline obsession with Alex Moreno and Jacob Ramsey coming into effect. So a bias swing there as well. I think you touched upon it as well again earlier, James. You can tell who did the prep for today's episode, because James has correctly laid it out for me to somehow transition through. But January's barely over a month away. It's not been ruled out that Villa could be active. I think we're all possibly hoping that it is, just because it gets us through the month quicker. Nobody likes a January transfer window where you do absolutely nothing and you don't even have an outgoing or an ingoing. It's just a month of seeing other people smile and laugh and go crazy. And as much as I don't really want to sit in Villa Twitter for another month of transfer window, I do kind of miss it at the same time. I'm interested to see what both of you think. First of all, I'd like to imagine a scenario where, let's not say that Villa have unlimited money, but they have a suitable amount of money to go out and find something that's going to be what Unai or Monchi actually wants to see changing the team, and what would actually, for example, the tweaks mentioned or the possible sort of challenges we could see with the weaknesses we've got. What would the club actually go out looking for? And if there was anyone you had in mind, but don't really worry if there's, I mean, I know for a fact James has got names already. But I'm very interested to see where you think, Dan, that the club would probably be outlining, even if it's not for January, if it's for summer as well, where they would be looking to not even improve, but just bolster.
So there's a couple of positions that I mentioned already, right back, and we in the summer we saw for the left back position we saw Digne almost out the door, and if we were to bring in some of the bit younger, both Moreno and Digne are in their 30s now, and then we'll want to have it interchange to senior left backs rather than have an understudy. But it's a bit of a concern for the squad going forward that both of your key players in that position have a bit of a running clock. And then you kind of look at the midfield depth. Tielemans was brought in. We thought he was kind of going to be some of that depth. It looks like maybe that kind of lack of mobility that has been part of his game for a little while now, that might prevent him from playing that position to its fullest effect under Emery. So that'd be another position. Those would be the three positions where maybe you'd look at bringing kind of senior help in. But outside that, I think, and this is probably one more for the summer, although if a deal came along in January, I wouldn't be too surprised. I think you look at succession planning for several positions. You think, okay, who, Robin Olsen, I don't think is quite as bad as a lot of Villa fans make out. But we're still seeing Martinez start almost every game, and once at a certain amount of minutes, you start losing that bit of sharpness that you need as a goalkeeper. You can look at someone who might take the number one position after Martinez. I hope he doesn't move on, but you have to plan for that possibility. The same with, I think Ollie Watkins has shown now that he, along with Ivan Toney, I think is the caliber of striker who could work well at a Champions League level club with his, and he's just absolutely faultless in terms of his dedication and commitment. And I think a lot of coaches see something there. Living in Germany and watching the Bundesliga as I do, I like seeing him here at one of the big clubs in Germany, like a Dortmund or even a Bayern. It'd be absolutely frightening the amount of space he would be given in the Bundesliga. And I think, yes. So outside that, it's just kind of sitting down and thinking, okay, so we're a squad of a certain level. We will need to sell players. It's just the unfortunate reality. This summer we sold youth players. We may have to sell a senior player in the summer just to kind of keep in line with the financial fair play rules, which are even more stringent when you're in the Champions League and have to deal with UEFA's FFP rules. So you kind of, I think Monchi and Emery will be looking at the squad and who could we move on that's not going to damage us quite so much. What can we do to take some of those qualities and maybe spread them out throughout the squad, and maybe take a bit of a Brighton approach to things. Be kind of planning these successions, a season in advance, 2 seasons in advance. The end of the season, trying to get more of your youth and fringe players in who might replicate the form of some of your bigger stars.
Yeah, I agree. That is the reality of it, and I think especially at the moment, we see a lot of news around the Arsenal and Douglas Luiz links, which I think will circulate for the rest of the season. It wouldn't move in January. I don't think the club would sanction that at the time. Summer's a different story. We also don't know what's in his contract and that, but it will be interesting to see if there is a first teamer that's appreciated by another club, and we see it as an opportunity to sort of evolve again in the first team starters area. I think again, I always come back to Luca Dean, that his age, the wages he's on, and it's not always about what they offer the team, but sometimes if you're looking at moving on, it's how you reduce that wage bill as well. And for someone of his age, if you can reduce that and bring in someone maybe that's a little bit different, that can help. But I think it's hard to say what we'd prioritise in January if we had adequate funds, because you'd probably ask our fan base, and a lot of them would say that the striker area. I think a lot would say midfield. A lot would say right back. There's so many different areas that people would say maybe we can either improve or, as you said, bolster. So I always look at the central midfield area in the sense of that sitter in front of the defence. I think that could make a big difference. We might have to just be creative with how we approach things in January, what markets we sort of shop in. And I don't know what the rules are on loans. We've already got 2, is it long loans, Aniolo? I think 2 loans at the moment. I don't know how many you're allowed per season. But yeah, I think it probably will depend after the December set of fixtures where we're sitting then. Because if, you expect that we will make it through to the knockout stages of the Conference League now. We only need 1 more point. And then if you're still in that top 5 area come January, there's either a big toss-up that you've got to make a choice on, or you try and attack it and run in both of those competitions. So, yeah, So there is like I always write down names of players that are either in form or just over a period of time impress me. But I'm sort of moving past that. There's my wish list because I think I have such trust in how Monchi and Emery identify their talents, and especially I think I said this in the summit. It's hard to plan for something that you don't know how they're going to evolve again. What the ultimate aim is of how they want to be, and we know that we'll want to dominate games and score loads of goals. I mean, the second highest scorers in the league this season. We want to entertain. Emery always talks about this, the connection with fans, and the importance of that is how many goals we score at home, especially. You have that connection with the fans, the atmosphere. It is really important in that sense. So, yeah, January is a tough market in general to approach. Let alone if you haven't got loads of money to spend, which I'm not sure. I won't pretend about that I know about what our FFP state is, but yeah, it's a tough time in general. So I'd sort of be patient with it and understanding that it might not be that busy, but maybe there'll be a deal to be done as well.
It's just it's a transfer window I've never particularly liked. It's rare you see a game-changing deal be made anyway in there, and it's just bad memories of strikers that we've signed in this window that have gone on to live long in the memory of ones that I never want to see ever again. So I find it. The reason why I asked is because not just because James wants to chat about it, and I do as James tells, but I find it interesting myself at seeing what we're in a position that as much as we felt like this was still going to continue on from last season, I don't think anyone really predicted this would be where we are now. I mean, fifth, where we are in the Conference League and out of the Carabao Cup. Don't think anyone had this on their bingo card exactly how it was. So I think plans obviously evolve, injuries happen, conversations happen with other clubs. As much as we want to believe it doesn't, tapping up still obviously exists, and players come in and explain what they do and don't want. And the club obviously has a plan, but so much gets lost, doesn't it, in football conversation? And it's why we have people like you on, Dan, because it brings a bit more just a bit more depth to the conversation. I much prefer hearing about the actual areas where we need to improve rather than why don't we just go out and get Jude Bellingham? And it's sort of like, well, yeah, that's great and all, but it's a system, isn't it, we're building, and it's not just the best man, it's the right man, it seems to be for Emery, and it seems to be that he is only getting people that buy into everything, and that's where I circle back to Clermont Longelay at the moment. I just wanted to touch on him because I had a couple of conversations with people over the past couple of weeks, and he was a very strange signing, I thought, but it feels like he's bought into the system surprisingly well, considering what his role is. I mean, he's very rarely seen on Premier League match days, and then he's seen, in cup fixtures. But I mean, he's almost faultless. And I thought I just wanted to touch on him before we left because I feel like he's a good analysis point on where the squad is in terms of buy-in, sort of towards Unai Emery and towards it. And obviously, you hear people talk about it and how professional it is. But I was interested what you guys thought about not just Longley, but sort of this adaptation around the club where we've all sort of accepted it almost. And I wondered how that translated onto the pitch and sort of around it in your guys' eyes, because it doesn't feel like it's like that's the football. It sort of feels like this is the football in a weird way.
The Longley one was really interesting for me because it was almost like we signed Pau Torres light in a sense, and I think maybe that was the case because the only games he's played so far have been Conference League games, haven't they? And he's performed in them, pretty well. I think he was he involved in the Legia game? I think he was he, or was he not signed by then? Yeah. So, but I think that was a game where no one was ready for that. I think I don't think that team had quite got their minds around what they were stepping into yet, and just a game of being countered and just punished really incredibly well. But something interesting that you did say before I forget about that sort of being the right person that you have to recruit. This is something whenever people talk about bringing in a new striker that I think gets sort of avoided for some reason is how Watkins changed after Ings left and how the dynamic around the squad needs to be right. If you can't just say bring in someone that's a backup, but then expect them to be the same quality as Watkins, and then you can't expect someone to be the same quality as Watkins and not affect him. It's so tough that the personal level of recruitment that often gets overlooked in that sense. So that's why it's never that easy to pinpoint a name really at the same time. It's for those, scouts and Monchi and that to meet with them face to face that makes a final judgment on things like that. But yeah, back to Longley, I have been quite impressed with him. To be fair, I did, I was always willing to give him the chance compared to his time at Spurs, because Spurs last year were a basket case for most of the season, and it was unfair to judge their defenders that often. And he's coming here, and I think this style of play and responsibility suits him, especially being on the ball. He's confident on the ball, and when I went to the Alkmaar game, the last one at home, and he just seems so confident on the ball, and you can sort of see that's the level of player that's played at high level, and played for big clubs, but he's fallen out of favour in areas where he's willing to give it a chance where he's a rotation option. So again, those are areas that you would think that we will look to do that again, maybe if we're thinking that a position or characteristic needs, addressing in the squad.
Yeah, I was quite sceptical about Longley coming in just because it was on the back of the Mings injury, and I was very concerned about Villa's aerial prowess at the time, and it's something that either teams that haven't picked up on, or we've seemingly dealt with this actually quite well, not having Mings there, who would always make first contact with the ball at set pieces. We've actually dealt with that mostly quite well. So yeah, I think yeah, it's a good point that you bring up about Longley. Very much sums up where Villa are right now, in that you are bringing in, a backup guy, and he probably would have known that going in, and just seemingly getting complete buy-in from him for what his role is, and for what he's being asked to do and bring to the squad. And you can only look at the management there, how the players are being managed, their expectations of game time, and just say, well, thumbs up. It winning helps. Obviously, winning. It's a lot easier to be a sub who comes on and scores a couple goals, as opposed to a sub that comes on to stop you from conceding. I don't think Leon Bailey would be as happy as he is if he were coming on to drag a game back from 1-0 down to a 1-1, as opposed to I could chuck a couple more goals on here.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation we find ourselves in, and I mean, I think it's why we had this chat today, was because we ended the obviously I call it we're sort of having mini seasons at the moment, but we finished the last one, obviously started off low and then ended on a nice little peak just before the break. That I was interested to see just where people thought we were at, and it obviously having you on, Dan, is just ideal especially for me and James, because it just, thankfully, you're another person that echoes a lot of our thoughts, and it's nice to hear the outlay that you see from it as well, because there's so many little bits to the game that I realize that I don't see. I mean, looking back now, I can clearly see that we don't have, for example, that outlayer right in front of defense. I've just missed that, weirdly enough. And now sitting there, I'm like, well, obviously we don't. You can see that now looking back, but it's so interesting seeing the way that we're going, and just now I'm just waiting forward to Sunday. I mean, I think the last thing I have to ask you, Dan, is what do you reckon the score will be?
Yeah, we're never going to keep a clean sheet. I'm going to remain positive. Tottenham have got a few injuries. It's a good time to play them. I'm going to go 2-1 Villa.
I like that. Go on, James. You know you're always second or first on my list.
I was going to go 2-1 as well. I usually try not to say the same score, but 2-1 in my mind seems like almost the obvious score for some reason, which it's not an obvious score, but it's that one that you go to when you know you're not going to keep a clean sheet, but you've got a real chance here of getting something. So I think 2-1 does feel right, and I always have to say if I expect Watkins to bag, that I want him to really badly bag.
All right. Well, I mean, you can't really judge Spurs is obviously the Monday Night Football fixture as an outlay because that was just odd. But I am gonna say an odd score, and I do think we win this 4-3. I've got this strange feeling that it's just gonna go a bit weird. And I'm really looking forward to it because I think like you said, it's a litmus test, isn't it, James? And it's going to be interesting to see how this sets us out. Lovely, nice, all positive score lines. It's so different from when we were talking about Villa last year, and you're like, oh, fingers crossed we get this 1-1 draw up next weekend. So, Dan, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on. I think James, I should have this right. I'm holding my ear now like I've got an earpiece in. First ever 2-time guest appearance on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that
so
is
you
right.
are officially in folklore to the AVFC Faithful podcast. Obviously, anyone watching, head over to X, Twitter, at 1874 Pritch. You can find Dan on Twitter, and it's great stuff. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I know it was quite a fun little chat through, and well, we'll have you on again probably in January, then probably again halfway through. You'll probably be on more podcasts than I was last year. So brilliant stuff. And of course, anyone watching, links are all down below for everyone else. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Nice and PG for James this week, so you never miss another video. And until next time, up the Villa.
Up the Villa.